When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga, Birth, Babies. And today we're talking about one of my favorite topics. We are talking about birth and the biomechanics of birth and birth prep, but specifically in the terms of doulas. And I'm calling this one the doula do's and don'ts. So I have as my guest Taylor Lee Bello. You might have known she's been on the podcast before. Let me tell you a little bit about her, and then I'll jump into all the juicy stuff we talk about in the podcast. So Taylor Lee Bello is a birth doula located in New York City and serving the tri-state area. She's certified through Doula and also is a body-ready method teaching assistant and professional. And this allows her to support her clients through alignment prenatally to prepare them for a more efficient birth and a smoother recovery. She's also a Prenatal Yoga Center teacher training grad. So I've had the pleasure of working with Taylor. Now we go through a big conversation about choosing doulas, some of the do's and don'ts, the red flags that might come up in your interview process. We talk a lot about how a doula can help you prepare for your birth and also about communication. When does a doula come on the scene? How do you communicate with them during early labor, during active labor? We also talk a lot about how doulas can support you. Now, I'm going to just say it right now. If you've listened to the podcast, you know I'm very biased about understanding the physiology of the biomechanics of how the baby moves through the pelvis. So we talk a lot about understanding how the baby's moving through the pelvis and how a doula can help or sometimes even hinder that if they don't have that knowledge. We also talk about the role of a doula during cesareans, and then of course how a doula supports postpartum. So I think this is a really important conversation, not just for parents, but maybe for doulas that are newer to their practice and are creating their values and principles behind how they serve. I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation. It was a joy to speak with Taylor, and I think it is filled with so much empowering knowledge of how to interview and find the doula for you. And then for doulas, how they may again want to build their practice. So before we get to that conversation with Taylor, I always love to give updates about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. So the best way to keep up to date on our schedule for our classes and our workshops and our on-demand workshops and our teacher training is to head to our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. You can find all that information there. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter that goes out with tidbits and videos and fun information about how to help prepare for your birth, as well as having a smoother postpartum recovery. So you can get all that information on our website at prenatalyogacenter.com. I also want to thank you because the listener, you have made such an impact on the podcast. I've had people reach out with ideas that they thought that they want me to explore, and that's been invaluable. I've also had people apply to be on the podcast to share their birth story or their expertise. So thank you for supporting the podcast that way. It really means something to me. Now I'm going to ask you to continue to help support the podcast by leaving a rating and review. It may sound silly, but it really helps build our listenership and build our community. All right, I think that's enough for me. Let's take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Taylor.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Whether you're packing for a vacation or dressing for a wedding, Nordstrom has head-to-toe looks for wherever summer takes you. From swimwear and bold color to romantic florals and dresses that make an entrance, find the right style for every unforgettable moment. Shop new arrivals from brands you love like Farm Rio, Free People, Vince, Waif, and Stod. Plus free shipping and returns and styling help whenever you need it make it all so easy. Shop now in stores at Nordstrom.com or download the Nordstrom app.
Hi, Taylor. How are you?
Hi, Deb. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am so excited to have this conversation. We have tried to get this on the books for a while. You are my go-to doula. And so we're going to go over the doula do's and don'ts.
Wonderful. I know. Excited. I'm so glad that there wasn't a baby that decided to come at the same time. Or a snowstorm or anything. Right. Yes.
So before we jump into this topic, and I'll make sure that we actually link to the last podcast you did, in case people didn't hear that, which they should, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become a labor support doula?
Yes. Wonderful. I, started off as a dancer by trade, and so movement has always been a part of who I am, and then got into yoga and deep into my practice and teaching yoga. And then I had my first baby, and I didn't hire a doula. I didn't really even know what one was until I was like 37 weeks pregnant, which is late in the game to kind of be figuring that out. And so I had a pretty long and somewhat traumatic first birth experience. And so I told myself, if I get pregnant again, I'm going to hire a doula. And I did for my second and third baby. And it was a complete game changer. Like, I would have accidentally had my second baby at home because it went really, really fast and I had no idea. And I love my husband, but he would not have been fit to catch a baby at home. So it was good that we had our doula who knew we needed to go. And then my third, I am pretty certain that I would have had a C-section without her. So it was a long labor. The baby was asynclitic. She was able to help me to move my body to move him. And just as they were prepping the OR, I delivered him vaginally. So it was just those two very different experiences. And I was like, I need to do this work. I want to do this work. I want to give back to birthers and give them the same experience that I had, because it was like night and day, not having one versus having a doula.
That's amazing. So I realize that most people probably know what a doula is, but for those that are maybe newly pregnant and kind of new on the scene and just starting to learn some of this birth jargon, will you just briefly discuss what a doula is, kind of what they do and what they don't do?
Right. Yes, of course. A doula provides, continuous physical, emotional, data-driven information, also non-medical support before, during, and after childbirth. So they're acting really as an advocate for yourself, if your partner's involved, just really empowering the two of you as a unit. And, regardless of the birth plan, whether medicated, unmedicated, or C-section, they offer comfort measures like massage. There's breathing techniques, positional changes, support with breastfeeding and family goals, postpartum care, all of that. So, there's some doulas that are full spectrum and do all of the work. There are some doulas that focus prenatally or focus on birth or focus postpartum.
Let's also highlight the non-medical, because This is where sometimes I feel I've heard some things that might cross over to not staying in their lane. So it should be non-medical and also not making decisions, but outlining options. The doula should not be making the decisions.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. So let's jump into how one chooses a doula. I think the interview process is really, really important. So how many doulas do you recommend a family interviews and looking at what should they be looking at? Like credentials, years of experience? What do you think parents should be paying attention to? And this is a big question also, it's many parts. And Are there any red flags that you think they should be aware of?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. In terms of the number of how many doulas to speak to, I would say anywhere from a few to a handful, depending on what helps you inform your decision. I think that you will know when you've spoken to the one that feels right for you because you'll feel it.
right? So I think it's most important to pay attention to how you feel during that consult conversation. Do you feel held, listened to, connected, a strong sense of advocacy? Also, are they explaining their credentials and training? Is the doula not only knowledgeable, but passionate about their work? And oftentimes asking them what led to their work can also give you more information about who they are, right? And so because birth is so sacred and incredible and beautiful, it will imprint on your heart forever. So you want whoever you're choosing in that space to be the right person. And I think it really is, two things here. It's like a gut feeling, like what do you feel in your heart when you're talking to this person? And also what is their training and their background? Maybe getting a referral is nice because you know someone that already used the doula, right?
Mm-hmm. I like that. And what about some red flags? Maybe they're having the conversation and something's kind of making them feel a little like, oh, I don't know about that.
Right, exactly. So I think that the biggest thing is figuring out what the doula really focuses on. So, one thing that's tricky about doula work is that you can actually be a doula without being certified. So it's kind of a crazy thing. You can just call yourself a doula and you can provide, prenatal and labor and postpartum care. But you really do want someone who's certified because there's a lot of different components and aspects of the work that are brought to light in the training. And also you want a doula that's trained beyond just doula certification. So, for example, I'm a body ready method professional. I've also done a lot of trainings in the city with Yiska Obadia, who's one of my mentors, and Manhattan Birth, right? So there's a lot of different trainings that you can do to kind of make yourself even more well-rounded and build on your scope. But it's seriously important to find out what their background is because anyone can support in birth and call themselves a doula.
Yeah, that is why I refer to you, and I have a small handful of list of people I refer to. I want to piggyback on that if you don't mind me jumping in.
Of course.
So at PYC, people know that we really look at biomechanics of the pelvis. That is part of our methodology because I think it makes a difference. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to put my 2 cents in. People can totally ignore me, but we'll fast forward this part.
No, they shouldn't. Listen.
But I think having a doula, during teacher training, I called it your x-ray eyes. And we use that when we're looking at bodies in front of us and learning how to cue and what's going on. But learning how to see and understand the sounds and the movements and the emotional signposts of how someone's moving through labor, and then knowing where that baby is in the pelvis is going to inform the positions and tools that we want to introduce. So, yes. And the funny thing is, like, I was just scrolling through Instagram and someone's like, deep squat, let's get that baby in the inlet. I'm like,
no.
So I think there can be, unless, again, this goes back to the training. And I'm also going to say, I'm a spinning babies educator. I did the body ready too. It's like, so obviously I drink that Kool-Aid, but having the knowledge for the doula to help the baby and the parents' bodies work together so baby can navigate its way through the pelvis, I think is huge. So I don't know, maybe I'm too on my soapbox, but I'm just going to put that out there for those listening. I think that's something people should look for. Again, ignore me.
No, I don't want to ignore you. I think I really think it's key because it's one thing to be putting, a birther and labor in different positions. But if you're just throwing paint at, a canvas and you don't really know what you're doing, it can actually make the birth problematic.
Yeah.
So you need to know where the baby is in the pelvis, the 3 levels of the pelvis. And based on where baby is determines what your choices are.
Your tool. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's just my bias, and that's part of our whole methodology. So that's just something I want to share with folks. So let's pull it back. I'll get off my soapbox. I'll put it away for now. So how do you guide clients to articulate what kind of care and support they're actually looking for, especially if they're not quite sure yet?
Right. I think that the best thing to do, especially like in a consult call when you're trying to, not only interview the doula's interviewing the client, but asking the client, when they think about their birth, what does it look like or feel like or smell like or sound like? Like, what are the things that they're hoping for in their birth? And we know that, birth can take turns that maybe we're not hoping for or feel unexpected. But so what are those things if that doesn't happen? What does the birth look like? Because then you can tell as a doula, am I able to support that, right? And generally when they're sharing how they're wanting to see their birth or hopeful for their birth, they can usually get a sense from the doula if that's their thing, right? So I think talking through that can be super helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about the prenatal and postnatal visits. So I know that we've talked about this, that you feel really passionate it should happen in person. Why does being physically in the client's home matter so much?
Right. It's really invaluable to be in person. Online, you just don't get as much of a sense and the clear story of what's going on. So prenatally, you're looking at going into their home and kind of seeing the lay of the land, because likely you'll be laboring there for a while, even if it's a hospital birth, right? Or home birth, of course, then you'll still be there. But just knowing the lay of the land, where the bathroom is, where the kitchen is, it kind of takes that guesswork away from when you're there in labor. You already know what to do. Also, being able to see your client in person and, getting to know them, getting to know their partner, if there's a partner in the position, and also being able to look at alignment. Of course, I'm going to bring up alignment after, everything that we just said, because again, the PYC training, I'm biased as well. I took it also. And I feel like it's just the most aligned to physiological birth. And so if you're not in person, you can miss things. And so being in person, you can really evaluate the alignment prenatally, and then you can provide different exercises and stretches to encourage optimal alignment. So those are sort of things that are more difficult or challenging to do virtually.
Oh, I love that. I want to dig into that a little bit more. So back in the days when I was a doula, I actually only took my yoga students, which gave me a really unique position because I got to know them, but I also got to work with their bodies. So I always believe that if we do the yoga work and the alignment ahead of time, we're hopefully setting people up for a more functional birth. Things are more in balance and aligned. So it never occurred to me that one then needs to, like as a doula, that maybe you're just seeing them for the first time, to be like, oh, we've got some things to work out. So how much prep body work do you do with them, with your clients?
Well, at a basic level, I do 2 in-person sessions, and they're usually about 90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on, what needs to be taken care of. But there's consistent check-ins. So if anything is going on, or if they're feeling something in their body that they weren't feeling before, then we're able to address that, right? So the care is really consistent upon hiring, and you have that all the way through the birth and beyond. So it's really important to do the work prenatally because, I like to compare it to a marathon. You likely wouldn't run out your door 26.2 with no training. So you need to put in the work. It's like that. The more you put in, the more you'll get out of it. And of course, in birth, there are things that we can't control, but we do the things that we can control, right? Which is that prep.
Do you give them homework?
Totally. Yeah. Oh my gosh, my emails, my follow-up session notes are so detailed. And one of my sections is actually homework. So it's funny that you bring that up. I love that.
I'm actually now suddenly missing. I'm like, oh, I would love to do that. Like look at a body, work together, be like, all right, so you have a big anterior sway. Let's work those QLs. Like I actually had a student in class who's consistently come the last few weeks. And I actually want to take a picture for the training because she's a huge sway back. And I want to, so in my mind, every time she's in class, I'm like, all right, let's work on pelvic mobility. Let's get the lower back a little more flexible. So I'm such a dork. That stuff really is awesome. Exciting to me.
It's really good.
So it makes me want to jump in and work with people like that. And I'm so glad that you get to do that with your clients. All right. So let's shift now to birth. So what is the communication like before and during the early stages of labor? So this is several parts. And then what should the clients expect in terms of the doula's availability and communication? And there's more. And what should the doula be prepared to do when speaking with a client in terms of judging when they should arrive on the scene?
Right. Well, this is also why the prenatal visits are so important, because you're providing this information ahead of time. So there's no guesswork when labor does start, right? So I always tell my clients, if you think labor is starting, even if you're not sure, I want you to call me, right? So it's not a text message, because text messages can be missed, especially if I'm sleeping. But a phone call, right? I'm not going to miss a phone call. And also my rule is, you call, if I don't pick up the first time, you call 2 more times. So a total of 3. That way, if I'm in a prenatal session or a doctor's appointment or whatever it is, if I see 3 missed calls from a client, I know that they're communicating to me that they think they're in labor, right? So my getting back to them is going to be very quick. And, from there, the early labor support is over the phone, because early labor, you can still go on with your day as per usual. The contractions might stop you a bit. Ignore it. Exactly. Just keep going. And what I do is I always give, depending on how they're sounding over the phone, which is really important to why I say the phone call and not the text, because you can miss something. And especially if it's someone's first birth, they might not know what to look for in terms of I think this is going fast, which it can happen, right? So that's why the phone call is so important. And I will always give check-in points. So after we are about to hang up the call, I'll say, okay, it's noon. Let's check back in at 2 p.m. But if anything changes, and I tell them what sort of thing, right? Stronger, longer, closer together, or let's say your water hasn't broken, but it breaks. You're feeling, rectal pressure. Hopefully you call me before that, but,
then we're having them at the house.
Yeah, exactly. Then we're going straight to the hospital. But I like the phone call, and I think that it gives them comfort knowing, okay, I'm talking to her in 2 hours, right? Or I'm calling before that 2-hour mark, right? So that just consistently happens. And I'm also in a text chain with the birther. And if there's a partner in the picture, the partner as well. And then I come in person when they're active. So, I pay less attention to how many minutes apart the contractions are and more to what the labor sounds like, right? So what is the birther doing as they're working through contractions? If they're not able to talk to me, then I need to go, right? So if they're still pretty with it and chatty, I'm oh, okay, I don't think they're active yet, But then from then on, so the rest of active labor through the birth and up to 2 hours postpartum, I am with the client. I do not leave.
I like that. I call it the stop, drop, rock and roll. It's you no longer are talking, you kind of stop, you drop the conversation, and your body's moving. So that visual sound is huge. I call it turning the corner. But what should clients be aware of? So say they're not working with you, but they're working with somebody else, about availability, because I know some doulas go on call at 38 weeks, some at 37. What is your general comfort and that people may want to consider about the on-call situation?
Right. I think if you're considering hiring a doula, I would recommend doing it as soon as you can, because I get a lot of last minute inquiries, and I love to help a last minute inquiry, because I too was in that boat with my first birth, and I wish that I would have tried to reach out to someone. You don't get what you don't ask for. So I appreciate the people who do look for it. But if you can hire on the earlier end, it just sets you up for having more options and also more security. And also you're going to get more out of that relationship with your doula, right? It's just going to be better for you. And what was the second part of that question?
About being on call. When do you typically start being on call for a birth?
Well, my contract says 37 weeks. It's 37 through 42. However, I put people on I put all of my clients on my do not disturb. So, I've learned, of course, through birth that babies come when babies come. So babies can come before 37 weeks. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. So, I like to know that if they needed me, that I would be able to, be contacted, right? So it technically on a contract, mine says 37 weeks, but I really put them on my do not disturb as soon as I'm hired.
So if someone's interviewing a doula and the doula's I don't start being on call for you until 38 weeks, do you think that's a red flag? Do you think they're just, how do you support someone through that decision? If you're I'm not working with you, but you live somewhere else, the doula I interviewed at 38 weeks. What are your thoughts?
I think that you can ask the doula to change it, and I think if it's really interesting to hear their reasoning, I think, for 38 weeks, because, I have some colleagues that do 38 weeks for first time moms, and then they do 37 weeks for second time, multips. But I just do 37 in general because I've had enough babies go before that, I like to err on the side of caution, which is also why I put them on my do not disturb. But it's totally fair to ask that. You have to remember that it's a contract, but it's also a relationship. So,
right. That makes sense.
And it's really interesting because if you ask a question and they're pretty hard pressed on it, that might be an indicator that might not be the best choice, right?
That makes sense. So you gave some great expectations around communication. Like, all right, if you're in early labor, we're going to chat. Again, not texting, but chat. What have you seen happens when those expectations around communications are not clearly set?
Right. The doula can miss the birth. Like that's
a big one.
That's likely what happens. Yeah. Because sometimes, actually all the time, if the phone call is not had, you have no sense of where they are in the labor. Right. And we also need to know that everyone's different and everyone's scope of knowledge of physiological birth is different. So you might have a client who really understands it and knows what to look for. And you might have a client that doesn't really know. So it's really important to get on the phone. And if I'm ever not sure, I just go, right? You just go. When in doubt, you just go to the client, because if it's too early and it's very clearly early, you can always go back home, and then you can go back when they're active. So I just think that if the expectations and communications are not clearly set, and that is the doula's job in the prenatals, I go over and over with my clients. What do you do if you think you're in labor? Call me. What if I don't pick up? Call 2 more times. Right. I also have a backup to that where they call my husband because I don't have a landline. I've never had anyone have to use his number, but it makes me feel better knowing that there's someone else that they can call and he's aware of it,
I do love that you have that extra backup. And what I'm really appreciating about you clearly indicating how you set it up is we may have some new doulas that are listening, and this might help them find their structure. So right. I appreciate you kind of laying out what has worked for you. Have you had the situation, I know I did, where you talk to a client at night and then you wake up in the morning, you're like, I'm still in bed. I didn't get a call. Did I miss it?
Totally. Oh yeah. And I'm like, oh, they didn't call me. Oh my gosh. What if they had their baby? I have not had that happen, but I've had the feeling of what you're saying happen. And usually it's that they're still in early labor and they were able to rest through the night,
Yeah. The contraction stopped or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was always the panic. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I would love to chat with you about your own personal values and principles that guide your work. So think about that. We'll be right back.
Girl, winter is so last season. And now spring's got you looking at pictures of tank tops with hungry eyes. Your algorithm is feeding you cutoffs. You're thirsty for the sun on your shoulders. That perfect hang on the patio sundress. Those sandals you can wear all day and all night. And you've had enough of shopping from your couch. Done hoping it looks anything like the picture when you tear open that envelope? It's time for a little in-person spring treat. It's time for a trip to Ross. Work your magic.
At first, I didn't think it was real. I woke up to this blinding light, and I was transported to another place. Pluto TV! Then I heard a voice.
Come with me if you want to live.
There were thousands of movies and shows, and they were all free. The truth is ours. It's just so beautiful.
On Pluto TV, free streaming of Terminator 2, Fringe, Arrow, The 100, and The X-Files may cause excitement, loss of sleep, and sudden belief in extraterrestrials. No credit cards or alien encounters necessary. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Okay, we are back. So you have been doing this for a while. You have a lot of certifications. You really created your own, I'm going to say even method and way that you like to work. So I'd love for you to share what are some of your main values and principles that guide your work as a doula through the labor process?
Sure. I think emotional support is really huge for me. And that whole, mind-body connection is really legitimate in birth. It is a true thing. If there are any mental blocks or any fears or any anxieties that you're holding on to, it likely will stall the labor, right? So the emotional support is huge for me because you need to work through those fears and anxiety prenatally so that when you get to the birth, you've already worked through that stuff, right? And if it comes up, because it might, then I know and the birther knows what to do, right? So giving coping techniques and breath work and meditation, all of that, that's very important to me. I'm also huge into alignment, as you know. I'm a Body Ready Method professional. I also took your PYC yoga teacher training course, which I remember crying at the end of it as I was reflecting, because I was like, this course was just so beautiful and it was so on point, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do because it is spot on and that work matters. So I embed that into my practice as a doula all of the time. So whether it's prenatally, whether it's during labor and delivery, even postpartum work, just supporting the body and alignment is huge in how the birth goes and also how the postpartum feels, right? So, going along with my background as a dancer, yoga teacher, the movement and the mindset prep and the use of breath, game-changing tools directly impact the birth. And I've seen it work, right? So I've seen people who put this prenatal work to work, and then I see their birth and I'm like, wow, that was amazing, right? Your body did exactly what it knows how to do. So I think that prenatal prep, not only emotionally, but physically, is so important. Yeah.
I have a question. So I know the work you do because we have a lot of similar background and we both truly believe in the biomechanics and the prep. Have you ever encountered, or maybe I should say it, how is it when you encounter care providers that are like, what are you doing? Like, what is this position? Or have they gotten a little more attuned? I do feel like it's more, I don't know if trendy is the right word. I mean, he's aware, a little more aware. I did a lot of this work years ago, and I remember even asking a provider I really liked and respected. I'm like, what's the baby's position? And she's like, head down. I'm like, I know, but can I get a little, like, where's like left, right? Where's the chin? Where's the ear? And she's like, it doesn't matter. Head down. I felt so invalidated, deflated, honestly, a little embarrassed because I'd made such a big deal of it. But I do feel like it's more practitioners are more aware. How is it greeted when you introduce this in birth?
I would say now it's like, well, welcome, open arms. Like it's much more well received than it was when I started my work. So when I started my work, I felt very much like you're saying, like kind of like oh my gosh, are they going to think I'm strange? Like, are they going to like think who's this woo woo person you brought in here? Right. But now it's more like, oh, wow. Okay. The baby is OP. They're sunny side up. Let's try to figure things out. I'm sure your doula can help you. Right. Whereas like before,
I love that.
I would maybe have not heard that. But that's also what I say as soon as I am talking to medical providers is I say, let me know how I can help you. Right. Because I want them to know that I'm there. It's like a team, right? We're all a team. So, and there are things that you can do to move the baby. I've seen it happen and work, and it's beautiful.
So during the pushing phase, I'm going slightly off topic, but during the pushing phase, how open are the care providers to different ways to open the outlet?
Much better than they were, right? So, I'll still see like the knees wider than the ankles, I'll still see that sometimes, but then I just kind of manipulate the legs to how I know they need to be in that internal rotation to open the outlet. But I've really seen them being very open to different positions. I've had a lot of babies recently born on hands and knees in the hospital. Nice. And, I think the first time I had that happen, the care provider looked at me and said, I've never done this before. And I was like, you can do this, because their training, at least, years ago was more pushing on your back. I think now there's so much more light brought into that movement, and being in a certain position really does make a difference, right?
Are you seeing, again, this is slightly biased, so I'm just going to own it.
Okay. It's all good.
Because you know how we both feel about biomechanics.
Yes.
Are you seeing more doulas embracing the biomechanics? Because as we talked about a little earlier, when you're just kind of throwing all the positions and you don't know where the baby is, that can create more problems. Are you seeing more doulas embrace that desire to help open the levels of the pelvis where the baby is?
I am. And I think it really is based on the credentials and the training. Again, it's like I go back to that, like just getting certified as a doula is not enough. You have to take, certifications that teach you about the biomechanics of birth and the pelvis and the inlet and the mid and the outlet and what to do when, because otherwise it is just like throwing paint at a canvas, right? So I've seen more, especially when I think about like my wonderful network of doulas that I'm plugged into, everybody's training. Everybody's doing different, sort of courses. Yes.
That makes me really excited. All right. So I'm going to switch to cesareans. And again, I may be getting a little spicy here and maybe angering some people. But one thing that I actually have a response to, and I keep it to myself, but I get pretty angry when I hear students say their doula left when they found out they were having a cesarean. I have many reasons I think that is not appropriate, but can you talk about why it's so important to show up for a cesarean birth, even if the doula cannot be in the OR?
Yes. Well, you never leave. You never leave, ever, under any circumstances, unless it's like a family emergency or you're unwell, but then you call in another doula. You never leave your client. It's, whether or not being in the OR, just your presence of being there and then being in the recovery room after birth is just as important as being there for the birth. So, I don't even want to say if not more, but like it is, because they've gone through this huge
major abdominal
thing.
surgery.
Hello, right? And then they have a newborn. Right? So there's still all of that support that you have with postpartum care and making sure that your client is being well cared for, making sure the
processing.
newborn.
I mean, they might have not been expecting a cesarean. All of a sudden, they're now with a newborn. Their birth, how they envisioned it, went a different way, and they just had surgery.
Exactly. And also, if there's a partner involved, being there for them, because there's this period of time where they take the patient back to the OR first, and it can be like 30 minutes of the partner alone, right? But if they have a doula, then the doula's with the partner, right? So there's that time where they can kind of talk about what's going to happen, what it's going to be like, what questions they have, what they want to make sure does or does not happen, So there's still like that advocacy there, right? So C-section or not, whether you went from a lengthy labor that needed to go to a C-section or you have a planned C-section, your doula should be there and will advocate for you and is needed. There's so much need there.
And I guess that should be in the contract. So if someone's reading a contract, or if it's not, maybe ask what happens if I have a cesarean? Like, what does that support look like?
I have like a whole page in my contract on C-sections. So
I want to see that. I'm kind of fascinated. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about, I know that you stay with your clients about 2 hours postpartum. What are you supporting during that window that the families may not even realize that they need?
Right. So that immediate postpartum care is so, so important. Also 2 hours goes by super fast. Mm-hmm. So that, the immediate postpartum care. So just making sure that, the placenta is birthed naturally. There's no manual extraction, making sure that, the bleeding is under control. If there's any sort of repair that needs to be made, that you have a very well, an advanced doctor doing it, also the newborn, making sure that the newborn is okay and being well taken care of. Also, if there's processing that needs to be done, which there usually is, right? And then you have feeding, breastfeeding. So that's a big thing. And that, making sure that your client gets the golden hour, right? So as long as mom and baby are healthy, everything they need to do on for the baby can be done on the birther, right? So baby can be on the parent and skin to skin, and all of the things can be done on them. They don't need to weigh the baby until an hour after the birth. So all of that is going on, and also, supporting the partner in processing if there was anything that went, on in the birth. It's really just seeing what is needed. And usually when, like, I say, okay, now I'm going to, now's the time where I'm going to wrap up and you guys are going to bond as a family. They're like, oh, no, they're like, no, stay. But they really are ready. At that point, I'm like, I know that I would never leave if I felt like I shouldn't leave, right? And that has happened where I've stayed longer than 2 hours.
Are there any signs that you're like 2 hours up, but they still need me?
Yes. Yes. I can just tell. I can feel it. And I don't leave if they're not ready for me to leave.
And what would that look like? Like they're just having a hard time adjusting. They're still like, what would that look like to you?
Yeah. Like maybe I really like, if possible, I like to wait until, they've had the birther has had their first pee, because they have to get up out of bed and go to the bathroom. And I like to be there for that part. And that usually happens around the 2 hour-ish mark. They have to empty the bladder. And I just really like to be there because it's the first time they're kind of getting on their feet, and it can feel really wobbly and kind of dizzy. And
I almost passed out. I remember swinging my feet over the bed and standing up and literally almost passing out. And my doula was like, and you're going to sit down. I'm going to go make you some food. And I'm like, okay, thank you.
Yep, exactly. And making sure they're fed and that they're resting, and I also won't leave if my client says, I really want you to stay. Then I'm going to stay, and I don't, it might just be that they need me there a little bit longer, right? They just want to feel my presence, or they want to talk, or they, maybe they want me to hold the baby because the two of them, partner and birther, have been up for, a night or two, and they just want to take a nap. Then that's great,
So in the following days following the birth, I know you stay in touch with your clients. What are you listening for as they transition home? And what is hopefully other doulas are listening to this conversation too, and this might help inform them as well.
Right. I'm always checking in with how physically they're feeling, because of course they just gave birth, right? So physically is so important, but also emotionally, just asking questions about how they're feeling. Have they been able to get rest? Have they been able to nourish themselves with, good food? Are they drinking enough water, hydrating? How is the feeding going with your baby? And also speaking, if there's a partner involved, speaking to the partner to get a sense of what they're seeing, right? Because what I might be told might be different than what they're seeing, right? So it's important to still approach it as like a team, right? So how is everyone doing? How's everyone feeling? And generally they'll tell me, they're very honest.
And then, so that's just kind of checking in on the few days. When you visit them postpartum for your postpartum check-in, what also feels important to check in person?
Right. So very similarly, the physical recovery, also the emotional response to the transition. So, adding a baby to the family, and also kind of just seeing what the home feels like, right? So like, where are they needing support? How does it look? Generally when I walk into a home, and, I have kids too, so I know I'm not looking for a clean house. That's not at all what I'm looking for. In fact, that would probably concern me more. But I'm looking for, are they getting enough sleep? Are they getting nourishment? Are they being cared for? Do they have any, family support or friend support? What sort of self-care has been provided for the birther and the partner? So that's why also going in person is so important, because you might see something that you don't hear over the phone, right? Or feel something even.
So I know this next question will differ from doula to doula. Again, we're just kind of giving your perspective, which I really respect and appreciate. When do you start to, I don't know if you even say wrap up the relationship, because I actually still sometimes through Facebook, talk to people that I supported years ago.
Right.
But when do you kind of close that and let them continue on their way as a family?
Right. So my line is always, once I'm your doula, I'm always your doula. Of course, in terms of like a contract goes, I do one in-person postpartum visit, and it's usually like 1 week postpartum. And so that's kind of when it culminates in terms of like that care. But I always say, reach out to me for anything. So even if it's introducing solids and you want recommendations on different ways to do it, just little things like that. Or you're struggling with, getting into a good sleep routine, just knowing that you can still reach out to me. There's once the door opens, it's open. So, clients are they're a part of my life and how I live day to day.
That's really beautiful. Again, so because I only took my students, I often saw them for months and months because I came to postnatal. So that was unique in that situation. But I love that you have those resources. We talked about them in the POAC trainings, like have your resources, have your community resources, like who are the lactation consultants, who are the PTs. So I love that they can come to you and be like, I need support here. And you're like, got the name. If you can't help them yourself, got the name. That's a beautiful thing that you offer.
Exactly. It's good to know when to refer out. I'm glad you brought that up. So like, if it's not in your scope of practice, just making sure you have your list of people that are good, high quality. It's good to have that for your clients as well.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? And I'm actually curious because you are a parent of 3, you are a doula, you're a yoga teacher, like you've been in this birth world. So I'm kind of curious where you're going to go with this. So think about that. We'll be right back.
Eczema is unpredictable, but you can flare less with Ebglyss, a once-monthly treatment for moderate to severe eczema. After an initial 4-month or longer dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Okay, we are back. So what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents or doulas?
Right. Well, I kind of have a couple things to say. The first one being, if you're able to hire a doula, hire a doula. There's always ways to find them in your budget range, and you can always reach out to me for support in that. I'm very well plugged into the doula world here in the tri-state area. So hiring a doula, make sure it feels right. The other thing I'm going to say is trust yourself. And what I mean by that is trust yourself through the hiring process. Trust yourself when something feels right. Trust yourself when something feels wrong. Because coming into parenting, that's always going to be what it is, right? None of us know exactly what we're doing or if we're doing it right, but we're going to always do the best that we can. So trust yourself, trust your body, trust your choices. And that's all we can do.
I love that. Where can people find your work?
They can find my work at taylorleebello.com and Taylor Lee Bello Wellness on Instagram.
I will make sure that we have all that in our show notes. As always, Taylor, I love connecting with you. You are one of my favorite people to chat birth with. So thank you for your time. I know last time we had a birth that got in the way of our scheduled time. So I'm so glad that we got a chance. And I really respect the work you do. And while I recognize you and I definitely have some thoughts about how things should be done, I'm hoping this may pique interest in other doulas to maybe explore some of the things that you shared. So thank you.
Right. I mean, I feel the same way about you, that, and the work that you're doing for the prenatal and postpartum community. It's just beautiful. And I hope that more and more people find you.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
In 2021, the wife and son of Alex Murdaugh, an attorney from a prominent South Carolina family, were found shot to death. The story captivated the nation. That's when we began the podcast Impact of Influence. In March of 2023, Alex Murdaugh was convicted of murdering his wife Maggie and their 22-year-old son Paul. The latest, Alex Murdaugh was granted a new trial by the South Carolina Supreme Court citing jury tampering. The case will be tried before the end of the year, and we will be on top of it. Get Impact of Influence wherever you get your favorite podcast.